you could have a much smaller, readership or an audience, but they could be really engaged and they could really value what you bring to the table, where maybe someone else has double the amount of readers, but maybe they're not super loyal to you, or maybe they don't follow you so intensely that they're keeping up with everything that you do. And I think that there's a lot of value in like small engaged readers and small engaged audiences.
That was Sherrie Costellano, and this is episode number 130 of the Chopped Podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Marley of the blog Namely Marley. I'm your host, and of course, this is the Chopped Podcast. You know, this is the podcast designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. Every week, my goal is to share with you interviews, thoughts, stories, everything related to food blogging so that we can all learn together about what works with food blogging and maybe even a little bit about what doesn't. Before we get into today's show, I have some very exciting news to share with you. Do you remember way back in episode 1 of the Chopped Podcast, I had Tessa Arias on the show. She's with the site Handle the Heat. And we talked about how it's very important for food bloggers to strive to become the CEO of their food blog. Well, I want you to know I wholeheartedly agree with this advice. And do you know what I think are qualifications of some of the best CEOs I've ever worked with? They are people who know their stuff. They know the ins and outs of their businesses. It doesn't mean they do those things, but they know it. That's the way that they can run their teams, and their teams can come to them with problems, and they have the vision and they help their teams move forward with all of that. If I was designing the food blogger CEO job description, one big part of that I believe would be SEO. CEO, SEO kind of sounds the same, doesn't it? Search engine optimization. How can your site show up on page 1 in search results? Because there are millions of food blogs, but only 10 first page results in Google. Only 10. How do you get your site in those top 10 results? That's the question. Well, we are excited to announce to you Chopped Webinars. We're beginning with a webinar with SEO expert Casey Marquis. Do you remember him? He was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and we received a lot of great feedback. The webinar is called Maximizing Blog Visibility, How to Dominate Google in 2017. Casey will cover the most common SEO problems facing food bloggers today. So what does that mean? Well, you will learn how to optimize your blog with Google best practices, and you can see how content, link equity, mobile usability, page speed, and also your particular recipe plugins, how they all work together in concert to rank your posts competitively. So what can you expect? Well, this webinar will be a live slide deck with a Q&A covering the most popular SEO related problems experienced by food bloggers today. The presentation will cover things like what Google is looking for in food blogs for ranking consideration. How does Google grade a page? What are the biggest systematic issues facing food bloggers? We'll have a detailed discussion of recipe plugins and schema markup. We'll also talk about why and how to mobile optimize for top Google rankings. Casey will also be sharing tools, tips, and tricks to increase your SEO traffic in 2017. Maybe you'd like to know a little bit more about Casey. Casey is the on-staff SEO expert for foodbloggerpro.com. You know about that site, right? That's the one that's owned by Bjork and Lindsay Ostrom of Pinch of Yum. And he is one of the most experienced food blogging SEO experts in the world. Casey brings a level of relevant experience that is hard to match. He has worked with the top food blogs, including Simply Recipes, Steamy Kitchen, Leets Culinaria, Brown Eyed Baker, and many others. So I know you're going to want to take advantage of this exciting opportunity. So how can you participate? Well, you register for the live webinar. It's being held on Thursday, June 8th at 12 p.m. Pacific time. Be sure to register today to take advantage of this early bird pricing that we've got going on right now. To do that, go to chopped.academy/webinar and buy your ticket today. I can't wait to see you there. Okay, let's move on to today's episode. Today I'm talking to Sherrie Costellano. She's of the site With Food and Love. I could have named this episode a number of things, like, for example, how to tune into your own authentic voice. Sherrie has so much of that going on, and I love that topic. So I was really thrilled for the chance to get to talk with her about that. But I decided to call this episode today Creating Engaged Audiences because I don't know. It seems like I hear people talk about that a lot. And I always kind of leave scratching my head a little bit like, what does that mean? It feels a little bit like it can be kind of Dilbert-esque, right? Like some bigwigs talking in languages you don't understand, saying colloquialisms, and you're left wondering, like, what does that actually mean? So creating engaged audiences, what does that mean? And Sherrie and I talk about that. We talk about what that means. And interestingly enough, tuning into your own authentic voice is a great way of also having an engaged audience. So go with me here. I've got a little story to kind of illustrate my point here. Okay. Do you know if you were to sit in an auditorium with a tuning fork calibrated to A, and someone on the other side had a guitar and they strummed an E string, nothing would happen for you. You'd be sitting there like, nothing's going on for you. But what if all of a sudden they started strumming the A string? You're sitting there with that A pitched tuning fork. It's going to start vibrating. It's because you're tuned into that pitch. I believe the same is true of audiences. If you start singing your authentic message, the people who also are motivated by that message will tune in. I think also on the opposite end of that, if you're kind of like a pinball bouncing back and forth between this and that, and you don't really know what your message is, you're just kind of trying to figure things out, or you're kind of doing what you see all the popular sites doing, your message may seem confusing to most everyone. And they're probably thinking, oh, I like that site. Oh, wait, maybe no, I don't. Oh, yeah, I like it again. Oh, no, maybe not so much anymore. It's a little bit like, I imagine if you were looking at a car and watching the blinker go on and off, on and off, on and off. That may be a little bit how your audience feels if you are not really connected with your own voice. But what if you knew your voice and you were resonating with it? Your audience will come. And that's the message that Sherrie is providing today. Just know yourself, know what you're looking for in your blog, and create your own standards for success along with all of that. I just feel like I really loved that she shared, that part of what she's doing with her blog, and it can make a big difference. Of course, we also talk about other food bloggy things, and it's a great chat. I think you're going to love it. In fact, I think you're going to love it so much, I think we should just get right to it. Here is today's feature interview with Sherrie Costellano. Hey everyone, I'm happy to have Sherrie Costellano. She's of the site With Food and Love, and she's on the show today. Hey Sherrie, welcome to the Chop Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I am so glad to have you on the show today, and I'm really looking forward to talking with you. But I think it might help everybody if we could just get started by you sharing a little bit about why it is that you started your site.
Sure. So after I received my undergrad degree in sociology and women's studies, I moved out to Denver, Colorado from New York State. And I just kind of worked in the food industry, like in the front of the house, in the back of the house. I kind of like did a whole bunch of different things. And at the same time, I was also working as a special education teacher for this private school that worked with mostly children on the autism spectrum. So I was like working this nighttime job of bartending and serving, and I was like physically burnt out on that. And then I would go to school and be with these children that demanded a lot of, time and energy. And so I was kind of like burning the candle at both ends and still really trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I knew I always wanted to work with people in some sort of health and wellness realm, but it never really like came together for me. And then in 2010, I moved back east with my now husband, then boyfriend, to Philadelphia. And we lived there for about 5 years. And at the very beginning of that, experience, I was really not feeling well. And it was kind of this moment in time where I was just really stressed out, but my body was just in shambles. And I just couldn't figure it out. But I had remembered when I was teaching special education that all of these children were on these specialized diets. And I always kept like going back to that and like, what did that mean? And long story short, I was introduced to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And so I went back to school and studied nutrition. And through that process, I was like, okay, there's some pieces here that I need to figure out. And I was eventually diagnosed with celiac disease. And so that was around like 2010-ish when I stopped eating gluten. And really slowly from there, my life started to improve. And I think it was a combination of removing something that was toxic, which was the gluten piece, but also just adding more things into my life that were beneficial. So I tried to look at it from this point of view of like, what can I eat that will make me feel better, instead of, oh crap, I have to remove all this stuff and that's going to suck. So it was really just like this moving piece that kind of evolved. And through that, I started writing and I started sharing recipes. And that's when my blog really formed in about 2012. It was under a different name. And I did it under that name for about 2 years. And it was more like gluten-free, like centric. Gluten-free was in the title. And I kind of felt a little bit like confined to that, because although that was, half of my journey, it was a lot of the other half was left out, like plant-based eating and really looking towards like vegetarianism to improve my diet.
Well, I was just thinking how ironic that is that did you say you were working with kids with autism?
I was, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I have a friend that her son has autism, and it seems like one of the things that they did was take him off of gluten, and he actually improved a lot after that.
Yeah, I mean, there's like tremendous amount of studies that are, showing all of these different specialized diets, and each kid is different and what they need is different. But it was amazing because most of these children were like corn-free and dye-free and, gluten-free and all sorts of things. But the gluten part was pretty consistent throughout. That I would say like majority of them were gluten-free, whether they had celiac disease or not. But yeah.
I just think it's interesting that you were working with kids like that and then come to find out, you were actually needing to remove gluten as well.
Totally. And I had no idea really the whole time I was there. I knew something was wrong with me, like, internally I knew there was a fire brewing, but I didn't know what the culprit was. Yeah.
Yeah. Because celiac disease, I mean, I've seen some people that have it so bad that they can't even touch gluten. Like, flour will cause their skin to break out.
Totally. And it runs it really runs the spectrum of like, what your symptoms and the severity of them. So there are a lot of people with celiac disease that is just like a silent disease where like they don't even know that it's happening. And that's the really dangerous kind, because gluten is hurting your body and you may not know it, but yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a whole range of people that, I mean, I put myself in this group that have intolerance issues with gluten. And it's not like, it's causing serious damage, but it definitely impacts you.
Totally. And the discomfort can be the same. So,
yes. But I'm lucky enough that I can every now and then cheat. But I just find that it's what I find interesting. Maybe you'll be glad to hear this since you probably don't get to eat wheat. But every now and then I do go ahead and have wheat, and I don't even really like it anymore. It tastes very doughy to me.
Yeah. So you're like you're training yourself or something.
Yeah, exactly. So honestly, like I use gluten-free buns now, even though on a Saturday, I have a day where I'm just going to eat whatever I want. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to have a veggie burger, and I'm going to have it I tried it on the regular wheat bun and I didn't even like it. So
crazy. Yeah. They're like the advancement of gluten-free products is pretty amazing these days. Yeah.
Okay, I have to ask you one more question along those lines. I know we're supposed to be talking about food blogging, but it's so interesting too. Well, have you tried the cassava flour? Does that work for you?
I haven't really experimented. I have, I haven't really experimented too much with it. But I know, and you know what, to be totally honest, I'm not really a baker, and I kind of hate baking. Okay. So
I got you. I'm just curious about it. One of these days I'm going to give it a try myself. Okay. So was your interest in cooking, did it go beyond, obviously you had this special diet that had to come about for yourself. Were you interested in cooking before that?
So the other piece of the puzzle really is that I grew up in a home where it was me and 3 other siblings. So there were 4 of us, and my parents were pretty young when they had us, and they were both working parents. So I was the oldest girl in my family, and I was kind of, I don't know if it was like this innate kind of sense of wanting to be in the kitchen, or if it was just learned because I was the oldest, female daughter, and I was like more of like a maternal figure and kind of filled my mom's, shoes when she wasn't around. So I would, start dinner at a very early age. I was, like making pasta and putting dinner on the table at like 8, 10, 12 years old. So I always really loved being in the kitchen, and most of what I know about cooking was learned from my mother and my grandmother and my aunts. And I really loved that, and always had until I graduated high school. And then when I went to college, I stayed out of the kitchen, and even through, my 5 years in Denver. So for about basically all of my 20s, most of my 20s, I worked in kitchens. I worked in the food industry, but I wasn't cooking for myself, and I wasn't caring for myself, with food. I was eating a pretty poor diet. And yeah, not in the kitchen. So my love for cooking really kind of reignited through that process of going back to school for nutrition and recognizing that, what you put in your body is really important. And cooking for yourself is, one of the best ways to, be involved in that process.
And I can imagine that you just wanted to share that, I don't know, that the reconnection with food and the importance that it has. I could see where you wanted to share that with your audience.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah,
So when did you start your blog?
So I started my blog in like 2012, and truly, like, I wasn't really a blog reader. I didn't really, I certainly never thought like it could be my career. I really didn't even know what I was getting myself into. I wanted an outlet to kind of just I had like this energy of just like needing to write and needing to create. And it was just like a really good outlet for that. And then I started, becoming friends kind of with other women in the blogging space. But still, I mean, this was 5 years ago. So blogs were certainly a thing, but it was a different landscape than it is now. And then it became like this community of women that were supportive, and I was just like, oh, wow, this is really interesting. I didn't really know this was the way it was going to be. And then just started really falling in love with it. And so, yeah, it was probably for the first couple of years, I was still working other jobs. And like I said, I didn't know it was going to be my like career. It
was more of a hobby.
Yeah. Yeah. It was more of just like a find time on the weekends kind of thing to do it.
So what about the food photography? Did you come into that knowing that how you wanted to shoot, or did you kind of learn that as you go along?
No, that was like a disaster. When I look at my original post, I just like cringe. I'm sure, most people do, but I was just like shooting it with my very first iPhone. I didn't get a DSLR until maybe 2014. Like there were at least 2 or 3 years where I only took pictures with my iPhone. And I didn't know anything about photography or food styling. That has all been, self-taught through the years. And now it's like one of my favorite pieces of the puzzle. So much of my storytelling is, through my camera. Yeah.
So I'm just curious, was it this connection with these other bloggers and you started looking at their pictures that kind of made you think, oh, maybe 2014, I'm going to go out and get my own DSLR?
Yeah. I've always been more of like a creative kind of thinker, and I'm very visual in learning and in processing. So I knew that was always a piece that I wanted to be good at. And I never had really picked up a camera, so I never really thought about it. But it quickly became evident that was something that I needed to do well in order to succeed in the realm that I wanted to be successful. And so it was kind of like a deal breaker. And then for me, whether it's like, if that's not something that's going to be great, then I don't know if this is something I'm going to be able to do. But then once I started doing it, I was like, oh, this is really fun, and I can see myself learning and growing. And I'm still learning and growing on that end.
I know. But that is the thing. You would think with a subject that you could just sit there and it just stays there, that it would be, you can master it really easily, doesn't it? But totally. It's hard.
And on the other side, like shooting people is like, it's something that I do, from time to time, but it's like, it's like a totally different game shooting humans, it's like, it's totally different.
Yeah. Okay. So all of this happened, and then 2015 rolled around, and you were a finalist for a blog award. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So like 2014, it was like my blog was, I was posting more regularly. I was like getting more serious. I was still working other jobs. I was a practicing health coach at the time, and I was a nanny for a family. I was like kind of had my hand in like a lot of different things. And I was like, I really wanted to take the full step to becoming a full-time blogger. I wanted to do that, but I kind of like didn't didn't have the confidence to take that leap. And then in 2015, I was nominated for a Saveur Award. And when that happened, I was like, whether or not I win, I'm still being recognized on this really, kind of bigger picture thing. And that was a huge honor and kind of a pivotal moment in my career. So that was pretty huge. And then kind of ever since then, I was like, I just went for it. And another piece of that was that in 2014, I was still living in Philadelphia, working all of these jobs. And then my husband's job took us to St. Louis in the very beginning of 2015. And when that happened, I kind of told myself that, like, I'm not going to fill the void in this time with all of these other, freelance or part-time jobs. I'm going to just like dive in and try to do this. And then about 5 months later, I had the nomination happened. And so then it kind of felt like, okay, this was the right timing.
And that's a pretty huge deal to get nominated by them. And I'm just curious, I mean, it makes me think that it's a reflection of the work that you're doing is, I don't know, like I mentioned to you before I hit record that sometimes I feel about myself that I have this tendency to look outside myself for all the answers. And I look like at a blog like yours. To me, it feels like you are following your own drummer. You're really kind of in tune with yourself, and your photos and recipes reflect that.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, yeah, I think that, I don't know, I have a lot of mixed emotions about the blogging space of, like kind of what it is now. And there's so many blogs, just so many blogs. And
I know.
So it's like, for me, it hit its saturation point a few years ago. And I just kind of, as long as, if you're not bringing something totally new or even like a little bit fresh or different, then like, why are you doing this? And that's kind of a question that I always ask myself, like, is this recipe worthy of this space? I mean, are there a million other golden milk recipes on the internet right now? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what will this,
I know.
You know what I mean? Like, what will this bring? How does this elevate what we're doing? How do I make this better for everyone? And so that's,
I laugh when you say that, but I also, sometimes I imagine food blogging as like, it's almost like a quilt.
Yeah.
Like, every patch has its own audience. Totally. And so I don't have a golden milk recipe right now. And just if anybody's curious what that is, what the heck are we talking about here? It's like coconut milk or plant-based milk, some kind of milk combined with turmeric, because turmeric is an anti-inflammatory. Yeah, I think it's good to clarify what we're talking about.
Yes. A golden concoction. Yeah.
Yes, there may be a lot of very similar recipes that are golden. It's like golden milk. It's like turmeric combined with milk. And so maybe my recipe would not be that much different from other people, but it reaches my audience. And and somehow it's like now golden milk has made this whole big swath. It's like a whole big quilt. I don't know. That's my thought.
No, you're right. And I think like everyone's take on golden milk is unique to themselves. But I think truly it's just like kind of thinking outside of the masses, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, maybe it's like what I'm hearing you say is like, don't just be checking off the boxes. Like, it'd be easy to say, do I have a banana nut bread recipe? Because everybody else has one, so I've got to have one. It's that to me is like a check off the box mentality.
Right. It's like, what are you adding new here? And if you're not adding something even a little bit new, then why are you doing it? And that's just kind of what I'm always striving to do. And not that I'm great or perfect at it. I just, when I'm going, writing and brainstorming, I want it to be something a little bit extra always. That's what I'm striving for.
That's really great. And so what felt different from you before the nomination of this award and after? Did you feel, I can just imagine of the boost in confidence that would provide for you.
Yeah. Well, what's really funny is that I left so what happens is the process of the Saveur Awards are, the magazine on their website, announces the nomination process. And that is, means that anyone can nominate you. And then ultimately their staff of editors chooses a selection of nominees. So it doesn't matter if you've been nominated one time or 1,000 times. They say that they look at every blog. And so the first round is all editor-based nominations. So that initial nomination is really what means the most to me, because it means that I've caught the eye of their editors, and for whatever reason, they really like what I'm doing. And so that was really like, that was a good, that was a great affirmation for me. But then, so then you get nominated, and then you're invited to this big party, and then you show up and you see all these people that you like totally, like love and admire and
fangirl.
Fangirl over. And then you're kind of like, well, wait a second, why the hell am I here? And I ended up leaving. I know I ended up leaving just totally down on myself. I had probably the lowest confidence level that I had had in a really long time. And it wasn't because I didn't end up winning. It was because I was just comparing myself to these people who I thought were so much better than I was. And it doesn't really matter if they are or they aren't. We are all in this room and we're all deserving of that. And so it's kind of like this imposter syndrome where despite your what is the word? Despite your accomplishments, like you're still like afraid that you're not that good, or you're not worthy, or you're going to be exposed as some sort of fraud. Right. So it's like, but then, so I sat with those emotions, and I don't think I even like put out a blog post for a little while. I think I was like, just really internalizing what all of it meant. And then I got over myself, and and I did end up having more confidence in the end, but it was definitely a roller coaster of emotions, and whether I was, worthy to be in that room. Yeah.
I think that's so interesting, because I do think like, we all, I mean, come on, we're human. We crave that external validation, but even that is not enough, right? Like I don't know who I was talking to. I was observing somebody else who posted something on Facebook about how they didn't like, like constantly striving for more followers on Instagram was what they were talking about. And this person responded and said they felt the same way. And they have hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram. And it's like, at some point you kind of go like, what is enough, right?
Totally.
Like that's to me like it's like an external validation. And I would feel the same way. But what's interesting is if you were probably in the heads of the other people in the room, like maybe you're looking at this person because they're a trained chef, and you're thinking about them like, oh, they're a trained chef and I'm not. Right. And then they may be looking at you and going, wow, she's got this, awesome photography skills and I don't have that. And I'm shit. I can't do this.
Right. It's like this constant, comparison game. And I think like the biggest key to like being successful in this realm of, profession in any other artistic field or anything really in general is to avoid that, that piece of comparison, because that's really where it all roots in evil.
It's so true. And it just eats away at your soul, and that's just not good.
No. It's the
Yeah. Okay. So then after you kind of recovered from that, did you start to feel a difference? Were things getting better for you then?
Yeah. Things got a little smoother and a little easier in terms of like, feeling worthwhile but then, I was in this new city. Well, I've been here for about 2.5 years now, but the first year was really hard. It was a very abrupt move. I didn't really want to come to St. Louis. And when I say I didn't at all. And I know, but I just like the Midwest was this totally uncharted territory. And I guess that's exciting in one way, but to me, I'm just such an East Coaster, and I was just like, I don't want to do this. And, but I did, and it all worked out because I really love it now. I mean, like I really love St. Louis.
St. Louis is pretty cool.
It's cool. I found my stride, and the community of people here are really wonderful. So for about the first 1.5 years, I just kind of like worked at home, cranked out blog posts, did a lot to like work on, making my blog financially stable and worth it. And then ultimately about truly like 1 year ago, I decided that like working at home and not really seeing a lot of other people on a day-to-day basis, not getting outside of my house on a day-to-day basis, was starting to really become too isolating for me. And I was really, trying to figure out a way that I could still be a blogger and still be this influencer, but have more of a personal connection with others. And I started thinking about what that meant for me. And one of the things that I love about my blog is that I love that I'm cooking for people, like essentially virtually. So I'm cooking, and then that maybe this family in Seattle makes my food. And so it's kind of like this shared experience. But how could I do that more tangibly on, you know, a more like
day to day.
Yeah.
Or I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So then I was like, started, really thinking about like creating these meals, or these dinners rather, that where, these pop-up dinners where I would cook for a small table of food, and I could kind of recreate that sense of community. And that's what I did. So now, in addition to my blogging, I host pop-up dinners about every 6 weeks, and they're reflective of the seasons and Midwestern purveyors. And it's really exciting. I really enjoy it a lot. It's a ton of work, but it's like really the thing that I look forward to the most.
And what does that mean? Do people pay?
They do. Yeah. So the first one was hosted in my backyard. It was still a ticketed event, but it was like I didn't have a space and I didn't really know like how it was going to go or what it was going to be like. So it was for 10 people. It was exactly a year ago, last like beginning of May. And I had one of my girlfriends, help me serve the meal. And that's pretty much how it went. And then I was like, oh, this is really exciting. Then I asked one of my friends who owns a cafe space that's closed during the evenings if I could use his cafe. And he was like, totally. So then it just kind of like, each one kept getting bigger and better and more streamlined and easier, and just kind of blew up into this thing that's been really, just received really well in St. Louis, and I'm just really excited about it. So that's kind of the gist. Yeah, I guess they're like one night dinner restaurants. It's like I come into a space and make it my own and create a menu, and people pay money to come. They buy a ticket in advance. And they experience this like 3-hour meal.
Wow, that's great. And I guess because you're used in a restaurant facility, you don't have to go through the same kinds of like, I just imagine you have to get, I don't know, what is the word I'm thinking of, like in order to serve food?
And sorts sense.
License.
Yeah.
License.
So it's like, I host the tickets through this company called Feastly. They started in San Francisco, and they're kind of, I don't know if they're in every city, but they're in majority of the cities around America. So like they hold the ticket sales, and they also take on some of the liability. And it makes it more flexible in terms of like logistics and having guests. And but it's like I'm bringing in all of my own plates and all of my own silverware and glassware and staff and all of that. So it's like the space is really this blank canvas, and then I create this experience that's all me.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. And so I'm really intrigued by this idea. I imagine you could have several goals in why you're doing this. Obviously, as you said, you love feeding people, and now you're bringing that to a regular group. But I'm wondering, is it like a financial incentive, or is this like paying for itself, or?
I'm definitely not making any money off of it. It's like by the time I pay for my food costs and my alcohol costs and pay my staff, when I first started, I just had my girlfriend helping me, and now I have 2 servers, as like essentially a sous chef who helps me plate, and a dishwasher. So once all of that is paid for, it's like we're not talking about a lot of money. It's really, and that's not what really motivated me in the first place. It was more of just like creating this experience. I wanted to give people an opportunity to enjoy a well thought out meal in a very like beautiful setting. I put a lot of time and energy into the aesthetics of the event and the tablescapes. And at a price point that like most people can afford. And I say most because it's certainly like it's in like the $40 to $55 range, depending on the venue and the menu. But there's a lot of pop-up meals happening in my city and across the country that are well into the $100 ticket range. And for me, that's like, that's a lot of money. That's something that like
it's prohibitive, yeah.
Perhaps you have to save for, or that is a total splurge. And I want to give people that same experience, but at a much lower ticketed price. And I realized that my value of an influencer, I could get it there. So what I've done is partner with a local partner with a local farmer who supplies me most of my produce. And then I give him exposure on my social media and in my blog. And that's led to more opportunities for him in St. Louis. So it's kind of like this 360, there's not a lot of
Yes.
people who are wanting to create meals, but also influencers. So yeah, I've just tried to like leverage that. But there still are costs involved. Yeah. So still working
I just
out
think
on
it goes to show, yes, there are other motivators or other, I don't know, like they can be intangible at times, but they really feed a lot into what you're doing. So that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like they're every 6 weeks. So it's like, gives me this really nice break of,
Yeah.
not doing them. So right now I just finished one last week. So I'm in this like 2-week phase where I don't think about pop-ups at all. They don't excite me. I'm like over it. I feel creatively drained,
Yes.
all of that stuff. And then in about 2 weeks, I'll start to get really excited about the one that's already planned in June. And then following 2 weeks will be the 2 weeks before the event. So it's kind of like this up and down experience of really being excited and then just like needing the break because they demand so much.
Yeah.
And then
Sometimes I wish blogging could be like that,
Yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
I feel like this expectation of 52 weeks a year is a little bit crazy to me. I think it'd be nice if it could be in 6 week or 4 week cycles.
Totally. It's intense. It's like you never get time off. And I think if anyone that owns their own business, already knows that, and blogging is definitely no different. Maybe even more so because you're so connected to social media and your phone all of the time.
Yes.
That even when you're traveling, it's like you're not really ever on vacation. And that's something I had to learn the hard way.
But it also this expectation of new content. I mean, I guess that you could look at that like a magazine. Magazines are always cycling out new content. I guess it's just the way it goes. But
totally. And it's like, how do you keep up with, food trends and then like being relevant and creating new things that are just as powerful as the things that you created this time last year. Yeah, it's you're constantly chasing it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm curious about between the combination of that and being nominated for this Food Blog Award and then all of that, has that helped you in the confidence as far as the business side of food blogging?
I don't know, to be honest. So the business side of thing is something I think like certainly for myself, and I don't want to speak for other bloggers, but the ones that I'm close with, I think we all tend to agree that is part of the puzzle that we never really thought about, that we have to be our own advocates on, looking over contracts and making sure we're making enough money and making what we deserve and, speaking up for ourselves. And I think that those qualities can either make or break you. And I know that there's like a lot of different companies and agents that can do all of that work for you. But I really enjoy doing that for myself. It allows me to be really involved in the decisions that I make, of course, because it's just me. Yeah. And I think the first year of doing that, maybe towards the end of 2014, when I started to get more like sponsored work. And I think it was like a year of like, making certain negotiations. I was like, wow, I'm kind of a badass. Like I am just like doing this. No one taught me. I just taught myself. And I think that's really where the confidence came from, is like just believing in myself that, I'm deserve just as much as anybody else. I'm working just as hard as everybody else. And just, telling brands what you're worth. And I think that that's probably a piece that a lot of people struggle with, because it's hard to put a number on the stuff that we do and what our value is.
Well, and I think sometimes we hear the numbers of other people, like, some people will do their income reports or whatever. And not all bloggers do that, but, you'll see they're getting a million page views a month and you're thinking, well, how do I stack up? How do I compare to that to a brand? But I love what you're saying is like just kind of taking a self-assessment and knowing what you bring to the table and just, representing yourself that way.
Yeah. And I think it's really important that like traffic doesn't really hold the same value that it once did. So this is something that I talk a lot about with my girlfriends, other bloggers, that is like, you could have a much smaller, readership or an audience, but they could be really engaged and they could really value what you bring to the table. Whereas maybe you have double the amount of readers, maybe someone else has double the amount of readers, but maybe they're not super, loyal to you, or maybe they don't follow you so intensely that they're keeping up with everything that you do. And I think that there's a lot of value in like small engaged readers and small engaged audiences. And I would much rather have a more engaged audience on a smaller level than this massive audience that just like checks in real quick to get like different recipes, or they're finding me on Google and they never come back. And as a brand,
Yes.
I think that's, if I were to own a brand or want to, put together some sort of like influencer campaign, those are the things that I would be looking for. How do their readers engage on social media with them? Are they interactive? Do they talk with their readers? Do they give feedback? Those things are more important, I think, in a lot of ways.
So I can see that from the user perspective. The user is like, I am only looking for a gluten-free brownie recipe. I go to your site, I get the recipe, and I leave.
Right.
But what you're talking about is more of somebody who really likes your story or some things that you're talking about, and they really connect with you, and therefore they come back, and regardless of what recipe you're sharing, they want to learn more about you.
Like they can't wait for the email to come into their mailbox that says like, with Food and Love or whoever has a new recipe today, and they're like running to their website because they want to read the story. They want to know what you're doing. They want to listen to your words, and I think there's a lot of power in that. And I think one of the best pieces of advice that someone could have given me, a few years ago, or someone that's just starting out now, is like, reach for that. Like, I don't know. There are so many blogs that are just like striving for this numbers game, reaching these numbers.
Yes.
And that's to me what is like saturating the market. That's bringing it back to like the beginning of the conversation. Those are the folks that aren't maybe bringing anything new, but just kind of like creating more recipes for the masses, which is fine. It's just, It's a different kind of experience.
Tell me more about that experience for you. What does that mean if you're building a small engaged audience? What are the things that you feel like can create that kind of engagement?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm definitely trying to build a more medium-sized to larger and engaged audience. But I think like starting, if you were, had smaller numbers, say your blog only got 30,000, page views a month, but all of those people are generally pretty engaged. I think that's a really great place to start. And that means that you're doing something right. That means that whatever you're writing, whatever you're creating is really authentic to you and people want to listen. So just keep doing more of that, I think, and then ultimately that will grow.
I see. So it could be, I don't know, very colorful pictures instead of all white, or it could be, maybe it's the pictures, or maybe it's the storytelling. Something that you're doing is working, and try to figure out what that is. So I think what I'm hearing you say is rather than us listing the 5 things you could do, it's almost like it's on everybody's shoulders to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, like just be yourself, and then create content that speaks to you, and then like pay attention to what other people are responding to. So if you think photography is, your strong suit, then really, shape that and try to really develop that and how that relates to your food. Or if you think your recipes are really unique, or, maybe it's like some sort of niche, like cooking. Yeah, just really pay attention to whatever you're creating, whatever is your authentic kind of style.
So what do you look for on a post that tells you, I hit the bullseye on this one. I've got an engaged group around it. What are the things that you're looking for?
Well, I'm pretty hard on myself when it comes to my photography piece. I'm really nitpicky, and I'm probably way too hard when it comes to that stuff. But something that I just really, whenever my photos just kind of come together, that's really when I feel proud of the piece. And then I kind of tend to share those more, or put more attention on social media to those posts, give those more love. And then the ones that maybe are, little not as good, or, not as jazzed about, I'll promote, but like just kind of one promotion is, good enough. But, I think it's just,
do you mean paid promotion?
No, just like I'll just like post it on Facebook, and then I probably won't come back to it.
Yeah.
Until like the next year when the ingredient is in season. But I'll just, I don't know. There's just like a certain feeling that I have, if the story and if the copy and everything just kind of works, it's kind of maybe it's just like a feeling and not necessarily something that I can like really pinpoint. Yeah.
I'm always looking for these numbers, like, oh, it got more likes on Facebook or whatever. And you're really more kind of looking for a feel that you get from the post itself.
Yeah, but I'm probably doing it wrong.
No, not at all. I'm not saying that. I'm just curious. I'm like curious. What's going on here?
Yeah, I think
because actually I love that metric because I have some posts that I just go, oh, I just feel so good about that post. I love, like, I just did this chocolate cheesecake with raspberries on it. And I just love the way the photos turned out. And that could be a really good metric, right?
Yeah, I think it's just like the ones that I feel really good about and confident about. And it makes me feel good to share them and to like be proud of that. And I guess, that's what motivates me are those kind of feel good posts where it's like, oh yeah, I did everything right here. This feels really natural and good to me.
That's good. And I think that can't be taken for granted. Let me just say it this way, because I think as we're out there and I call it voice creep, where we read somebody else's post and their voice, the way they speak and on their blog can easily start to, come into your own writing. I think it's really hard not to have some kind of voice creep going on. And so knowing who you are, knowing the way you want to write and the way you want to shoot, the way you want that post to look and the recipe and everything, I think, I mean, it sounds like to me like you're kind of creating your own mold for what is a great post for your site. Yeah,
I mean, I think at this point, from doing this for a few years now, that I can pretty much visualize like what the end result will look like or what I want it to look like, and I kind of just and I even like make some notes for photography where it's like, oh, I want to have a couple of these in progress shots horizontal, and then I want the final piece like this, and I'll kind of draw like a little to-do list of sorts, kind of like a visual to-do list where it's like, because sometimes I think the photography piece is like really overwhelming and you just don't really know what to shoot or what will look the best. But I make these little notes and then I can kind of like go off that if I'm feeling a little stuck.
That's great. And so I'm curious, I'm not asking for you to give specific numbers. I was just curious, if we had a pie chart in front of us, would you mind sharing like, the sources of revenue and, like what maybe are you mostly getting revenue from ads or mostly from sponsored posts, things like that?
I would say like if we're doing a pie here, I would say like at least 3/4 of the pie is sponsored work. And I don't really I do about 6 posts a month, and I would say 2 of those posts are sponsored. And that's kind of the ratio that I feel comfortable with, where I don't want all of my work to be sponsored just because I feel like that tinges my authenticity. But, at least 2 of them are. And I kind of I shifted this kind of perspective a few years ago where I was just kind of like taking all the sponsored work that I could because I thought that was the best way to do it in terms of money. And then I just kind of shifted where it's like, I'm just going to charge more and I'm going to do less and I'm going to do more that I feel really good about. And then I'll still have X amount of posts per month where I can do some book reviews or, like some sort of travel piece. And so I would say most of my income is sponsored posts. And then some of it is ad revenue. Although I just put ads on my website like a year ago, which kind of is, I don't know, weird, I guess. And I just I hate thinking about the money that I've left behind, but I just for the longest time aesthetically just didn't like it and didn't want it and didn't find much value in it. But now that I have them, and I love my ad company. I'm with Mediavine. I really love them. They have like the best customer service. And they're just great folks.
Amazing.
I think. Is that who you're with?
They sponsored the conference last year. I love them all. They're just really great people.
Yeah, they're just the best. And so after I signed up with them, I was like, oh, this isn't so painful. This is okay. I can do this.
Well, and it seems like they work with the blogger too, right? Like if you want to have your site saturated with ads, you can. But if you'd rather have a more minimal look, then you can do that too.
Totally. They want to make you happy. I think I had like one little stationary ad, for the majority of my blogging on the top right corner. But other than that, I was like, no, I can't do this. But they've made it pretty painless. And then I get a lot of other work, just like freelance recipe development for different brands that, isn't blog related or I actually write for Feast Magazine, which you get in Kansas City.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So I have a column in that, and that kind of, spurred off of my my blog. And yeah.
It's a great magazine.
Yeah.
Beautiful photos.
Yeah, I'm really proud to work
Do you
with
shoot?
them.
Do you have are your photos in that magazine too?
Yeah, so my monthly column is a recipe and story and photography by me. It's called Healthy Appetite. And then
Great.
I've done a couple covers for them, and sometimes I'll do like some features of seasonal recipes. So it's kind of just like whatever work they want to give me, and I'm happy to take it. And like, yeah, they're great. They're wonderful.
That's awesome. I love the fact that you've got your pie it's got some variety to it. So I think it seems like, if you were saying that you get a little stir crazy when you're inside too much, you've got a nice mixture of things that keep you going.
Yeah. Now I feel like I've got a good rhythm down. Yeah. I get out enough now.
That's good. Again, it's all back to like knowing yourself and what really makes you tick.
Totally.
And I agree with you. I can be behind my desks too much, and I find I'm not happy in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So, you already answered this question. I always like to, end with this question. What would you tell somebody if they were new and starting out? And you mentioned that, which I think your advice was know yourself and just really create your blog around that.
Yeah. Well, I think the first question would be, why do you want to have a blog? And what will that blog bring to the space? And that's already, that already exists. And does it bring anything special or interesting or new? And if it doesn't, I think it's really just kind of reconsidering what would. I think it's just blogging is like, it just kind of depends on your motive to get into the blogging world. Like, do you want to make that your job, or do you just want to have a creative outlet? I think the question would be, why do you want to blog, and what do you plan on doing on your blog that brings a new piece of energy into the blogging world? Does that make sense?
Yep, that's very good advice. Okay, so I have these fun questions I like to ask at the end of the interview. Are you game?
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so what's one food item you can't live without?
Oh, well, the first thing that popped into my head was olive oil. And that's probably pretty boring, but it's like the foundation of like everything that I cook. So yeah.
What's your favorite way to use olive oil? I'm curious.
Oh, just like literally anything that I'm making. That's the first thing that goes into the pan for me. So
I always feel like simmer onions and olive oil. It's like the dark and stormy night of a novel. Like so many novels you can imagine start with that beginning. And so simmer onions and olive oil, and that's like the beginning of a good recipe novel.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay. So what's the favorite app on your phone? And I think you mentioned one already, which was, what did you mention?
Did I?
Feastly? Maybe that's not an app.
Feastly is a company that hosts pop-up dinners, essentially. Yeah. My favorite app right now is my Fitbit app, because I just got a Fitbit like last week and I'm obsessed with it. But other than that, I don't know, Instagram is like, a constant checking, scrolling, and looping.
Yes. Yeah. So are you like checking your steps and things like that?
Yeah, basically. Well, I learned that, my lifestyle changed a lot when I moved to St. Louis. When I lived in Philadelphia, I lived downtown Philly. We didn't ever drive our vehicle. We were walking miles every day, just, doing our normal routine. And St. Louis is a much more Midwestern spread out city. So cars are required, and I haven't been getting enough steps and all. That's basically.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. And then people complain if they don't get a front parking spot. It's like, what are you talking about? You can walk a few spots.
Really no idea what it's like to try to find parking.
Yeah. We don't even know what we've got here in the Midwest.
True.
Yeah.
I have a driveway and like, that's the best thing that's ever happened to me since I moved here. So it's pretty awesome. Yeah. In Philly, exactly. I would spend like majority of, a good hour every day after, if like anytime I brought out my car, it would take like about an hour to find some parking. So yeah.
But I think a Fitbit or some kind of step tracking is a great tip for any food blogger, because you can easily spend your entire day in front of the screen.
Totally.
And how unhappy we are when we do that.
Totally. Yeah. It's wonderful. And it gives me like a little reminder to get up when I've sat too long and
Yeah.
It's great. I'm really into it right now.
I oftentimes, if I have a phone call with, even if it's a brand or somebody that's calling me to, it's like a meeting, I'll take it and I'll walk and I'll let them know because, you can hear the background sounds. They know that I'm outside. So I'll say, as I'm talking to you, I'm walking because I got to get my steps in or something. And everybody loves it.
Yeah. Good for you. That's a really great idea. Yeah.
I know. And people, like I say, I used to do that at my company. We would have meetings and there was this great walking trail across the street. So we'd say, why don't we schedule this meeting? We'll do a walking meeting.
Amazing.
And so now I have to do that myself. Right. Okay. Do you have any time for TV at all? If you do, what's your favorite show?
What is my favorite TV show? Well, I mean, I am not going to lie. I am kind of really into Bravo. And when I've like had a really stressful day, like I can just put on some Real Housewives. My favorite are like New York and Beverly Hills. And I can just like zone out. I'm usually doing work on my computer at the same time. I'm doing like phone screen, computer screen, TV screen. It's really bad. But it kind of like allows me to
multitasking,
like, chill for a second. Yeah. It's kind of just like, brainless like fodder of just like, chilling out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then you can do your things like Pinterest or things like that. Just so kind of mindless work.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
I love it. That's great. Okay. So Sherrie, how can people find you online?
They can find me on Instagram, Twitter, at With Food and Love and withfoodandlove.com and Pinterest and Facebook. All of my social media is at With Food and Love, and my blog is withfoodandlove.com.
Wonderful. Sherrie, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I had a really good time.
Thank you so much for having me, Marley. It's been great.
Thanks to Sherrie Costellano for being my guest on today's episode of the Chopped Podcast. Be sure and register for the Maximizing Blogger Visibility webinar today. You can do that by going to chopped.academy/webinar. Hurry so you can take advantage of those early bird ticket prices. Thanks to everyone for your reviews of the podcast on iTunes and Stitcher and social media as well. Please keep spreading the word. It makes a big difference. You inspire me, and I hope today's show is helpful and inspirational to you as well. Thanks for listening. Now go forth and be your best you.